This is 7th Generation Warfare, and I'm your current host, John Nelson. In this episode, we'll be continuing to look at Marine Corps Doctrinal Publication Number 1, Warfighting, and we are on the chapter The Spectrum of Conflict. Conflict can take a wide range of forms, constituting a spectrum which reflects the magnitude of violence involved. At one end of the spectrum are those actions referred to as military operations other than war, in which the application of military power is usually restrained and selective. Military operations other than war encompass the use of broad range of military capabilities to deter war, resolve conflict, promote peace, and support civil authorities. Sounds like 7th generation warfare. Uh, we are, as 7th generation warfighters, applying military thought, actions, doctrine, acronyms, military effort, military capabilities in order to promote peace, deter war, and resolve conflict, and support civil affairs. So, yeah. So we're just a low on the spectrum of conflict. At the other end of the spectrum is general war, a large-scale, sustained combat operation such as global conflict between major powers. Where on the spectrum to place a particular conflict depends on several factors. Among them are policy objectives, available military means, national will, and density of fighting forces or combat power on the battlefield. Yeah, we're not concerned with. Hopefully, we're not ever getting violent. You should have the capability to defend yourself, but certainly in modern society, as I think most societies throughout time, the need to really defend oneself in a violent way doesn't happen very often. And if you have a little bit of foresight, you can remove yourself from potentially violent situations before they get there. Be it out in a crowd where there's a drunk, aggressive person who's looking to fight, you can move on somewhere else in the crowd and ignore them. Or be it a national totalitarian government taking over, then you could probably move out of the country a generation or two before the society gets violent. In general, the greater this density, the more intense the conflict. Each conflict is not uniformly intense. As a result, we may witness relatively intense actions within a military operation other than war, or relatively quiet sectors or phases in general regional conflicts or general war. Yeah, so like I said, ideally in 7th generation warfare, it's supposed to be a peaceful type of war. There could come a time when it in fact gets very violent. Say somebody breaks into your home, you have a home invader, then yeah, you should kill them, and you should use all the military force or violence that you can at your disposal to eliminate that threat, because the livelihood of you and future generations of your family depend on you putting down that threat. But in general, 7th generation warfare is nonviolent. Military operations other than war and small wars are more probable than a major regional conflict or general war. Many political groups simply do not possess the military means to wage war at high end of the spectrum. Yeah, nor should they. I mean, I think it's disgusting that militaries exist in their. I'm talking U.S. military, Chinese military, Russian military, the large militaries of the world. I think it's kind of disgusting that they exist the way they do. Many who fight a technological or numerically superior enemy may choose to fight in a way that does not justify the enemy's full use of that superiority. Yeah, that's called asymmetrical warfare. Um, unless actual survival is at stake, political groups are generally unwilling to accept the risk associated in general war. However, a conflict's intensity may change over time. Belligerents may escalate the level of violence if the original means do not achieve the desired results. Similarly, war may actually de escalate over time. For example, after an initial pulse of intense violence, the belligerents may continue to fight on a lesser level, unable to sustain the initial level of intensity. So, I hope when fighting seventh generation warfare that the level of the seventh generation warfare fight escalates over time. Because right now I'm at 3 children. Inshallah, I'll have more. But it should be a multiplying effect that, right now I'm just one war fighter. Potentially, if I can sell it to my kids, I could have next generation would be 4. Maybe, with their kids, maybe we're up to a dozen or more war fighters in just 2 generations, and hopefully the concept expands kind of exponentially like that. What I do not want to happen is for the seventh generation effort to de escalate over time. I hope that I will continue to find creative ways to communicate it, articulate it, and actually engage in the fight. The Marine Corps, as a nation's force in readiness, must have the versatility and flexibility to deal with a situation at any intensity across the entire spectrum of conflict. This is a greater challenge than it may appear. Military operations other than war and small wars are not simply lesser forms of general war. A modern military force capable of waging war against a large conventional force may find itself ill-prepared for small war against a lightly equipped guerrilla force. So, in 7th generation war, be prepared. Like I said, I'm hoping my 7th generation war will expand exponentially with my children and grandchildren taking up the fight, but I also have to be prepared if it doesn't. If I can only sell one child on the idea and like sell them half-heartedly on it, how do I keep enough of that fight alive in him or her that they'll at least continue it to the next child? So I have to be prepared for whatever the future holds, because ultimately it's not just my will we're dealing with, it's the will of all my descendants. That concludes the spectrum of conflict. Next episode, we will be talking about the levels of war.